Folks, this is not an attempted murder case. No one is standing here saying to you that on June 12th, the defendant was trying to kill Erin McCarthy. It's not what the state is charged, and it's not what the state has to prove. What the state is tasked with proving to you is that on that June 12th day, the defendant demonstrated extreme indifference to the value of Erin's life. It's not the extent of her injuries, and it's not the result that controls. It's what his actions were. And what they were violent, they were dangerous, they were unprovoked, and they risked her death. This case is about a defendant waiting 8 hours to attack a 19-year-old girl who was walking out of her place of employment from behind in the dark and beating her repeatedly. The manifestation of 6 months of an obsession with getting Stephen Bunch. And how does the defendant choose to send his message to Stephen Bunch? By attacking his 19-year-old girlfriend. And when he did that, he acted with extreme indifference to the value of her life. The defense in his opening told you this was immature behavior. This was not immature. It was not the product of someone who was irresponsible or who made a poor decision. The defendant is guilty of second-degree assault. So I want to talk about the evidence that you have before you to make that decision. And I want to start with the attack. One of the instructions the judge is going to give you is you look at the whole circumstances. You don't just look at this in isolation. You look at the totality of the circumstances when making your decision. So I want to start right at the beginning. And I want to talk about the first punch. The moment that Erin McCarthy walks out of Planet Fitness at 10:02, the defendant gets out of his car. He doesn't wait. He goes right towards her. As soon as he sees her, there's no hesitation. She has no idea what's about to happen. Never even heard the name Jordan Lamonde in her life. That is evidence of his intent. Evidence of his calculation and what his plan was in that moment. Evidence of his thought process and how he was strategic. Because what does he do in the video? He's walking towards her. He has every opportunity to attack her from the front when she has the opportunity to protect herself, to block some of these punches. But that's not what he does. What does he do? He waits. He waits until she walks behind him and he can come at her from behind. When she is completely unprotected, has no idea. And he accomplishes his goal of deception. He attacks her when she is most vulnerable, where he can inflict the most damage. And also, when she won't see who it is, so she can't identify her attacker. So I want you to consider that when you think of his intent in that moment. And watch this moment right here. What is he doing right before he punches her? He shuffles his feet. He gains momentum. He builds up speed to unleash this one punch. This one punch that you can see is designed for one thing, to knock her out. He's trying to put her down with one punch, put her unconscious, and what happens when people go unconscious? They fall to the ground. They can't protect themselves, and they hit whatever's on the ground. In this case, that car on the left and pavement. Those are the two things that Erin could hit. It's why UFC rings, boxing rings have a padded floor. So when people fall unconscious, they're protected. This was no sanctioned fight. It was hard pavement that awaited Erin. She could have hit the pavement if the punch was successful. This full steam sucker punch to the side of the head. He is acting recklessly. He is consciously disregarding the risk. He is blatantly disregarding the risk to Erin's life in that moment alone. That's not the only moment we see. And I also want to point out one thing. Think about where he hits her. He comes up from her behind. He could hit her on the back, He could hit her on the shoulder. He could hit her on the arm. That's not where he goes. He's methodical, he aims, and he hits directly where he's looking to hit, right in her head. But that first blow, it doesn't have the effect that we were talking about. And I told you in my opening, there was 40 punches. 40 punches total. In this moment right here, you're going to see 20 punches. That's what I was referring to. This fist of fury, punching, 20 punches right there, every single punch. Again, focusing on her head and on her face. This barrage of punches, again, demonstrating a blatant disregard for her life. And at this point, Erin tells her, she's crying out, why? Who are you? Why are you doing this to me? She doesn't even know who the stranger is that's just randomly pummeling her. And then we see the third act. After he's punching her some more, he picks her up and slams her onto the pavement. Again, slamming her body, slamming her head. The wrist elevating. Elevating every act. He's going to hit her head on the ground and kill her. A blatant disregard for her life. And now, as if that's not enough, and remember folks, the defense tells you, well, nobody had to pull Jordan off. Nobody had to keep doing this either. He could have walked away at any point. He chose this environment. He chose a location that's dark at 10 o'clock at night when nobody is around. And defense says, well, you can't see it, that it's a knee to the face. Don't take my word for it. Watch the video. You'll see it. It's clear as day. That knee goes right to her face. Boom. You can see her head snaps back. A move reserved to knock somebody out in a UFC fight. That's not enough, and he does it again. Boom. A second one. Again. Right to her face. And the only reason that she's still up at this point is because he's holding on to her as he's doing this. So she can't get away. She can't fall down. And she can't protect herself. This is not the behavior of an immature man who made a mistake. It's the acts of a person who was out for revenge, a man obsessed with sending a message, who had a blatant disregard for her life. And watch the end of the video. Hits her some more, still punching her. His sunglasses off, he throws her to the ground, and he flees. But don't take my word for it. You're going to have this video when you go into your deliberations. Watch it. Watch every punch. Watch every knee. Watch the force. Watch the location. And ask yourselves that question. Is this somebody who is blatantly disregarding the risk to her life? And when you do that, the answer will be yes. But the video isn't all the evidence you have. You heard from paramedic Gagnon, who talked about some of the observations that he made, the injuries. You have Officer Marvin, who told you when she felt that lump on the back of her head, she was worried as the first responder about the potential for bleeding on her brain, which can cause death. Erin told you how she went to the hospital to get a CT scan. And the defense says, well, we know from common sense this doesn't risk death. Really? Is that your common sense? That this doesn't risk someone's death? Ask yourselves that question. It's why football players wear helmets. It's why boxers wear gloves, mouth guards, and have a referee. Because we as a society recognize the risks associated with getting hit in the head. The risk that the defendant disregarded when he attacked Erin. So I want to talk briefly about what happens after the attack. You've had an opportunity to observe all of Erin's injuries. You've seen the bruising on her face, the blood on her hands, and you heard about the lump on her head. Officer Marvin told you she was shaking. She was trembling. She's the first officer on scene. Erin is distraught. She had just been attacked in a dark parking lot by a stranger. A worse nightmare scenario. So she took her outside, tried to calm her down, and she shows Officer Marvin Window's sunglasses have been thrown off. The sunglasses that you'll see in the video is what causes the defendant to leave, because his disguise has been exposed. A few days later, Erin takes some more pictures of her bruising, which you'll have to take a look at, and Detective Livingstone told you he met with her about a week later. She still had that bruising. The defendant suggests to you, well, a week later, she told WMUR that she was doing okay, that she had recovered from this assault. That's not a fact that cuts against the state. Because as you're going to hear, the law doesn't require the injuries to be life-threatening. It's designed to distract you, and it doesn't change the analysis. You certainly know by now why this happened. I think it's important just to touch on it briefly. This was to send a message. It was deliberate, and it was planned, because beating Erin was going to be the ultimate revenge. Folks, he was a coward. He didn't go after Stephen Bunch. He didn't wait for him at his place of employment. No. He went after his 19-year-old girlfriend to send a message. He figured out what time she worked, where she worked, and what type of car she drove. It was not immature. It was a plan, and it was blatant. You heard from Joseph and Savannah. Joseph told you specifically this was something that ended up costing him his job, this obsession with the safe. He continued to pursue what happened, and he thought he knew who it was, and he was engaged in finding out. That was what he was doing for that 6-month period, figuring out who stole his safe so he could get even. And even to him was attacking Erin, not Stephen. It's a coward. He says he's sorry. This was immature. Don't forget, a week after this happened, the police went to his house. He had every opportunity to own up to what he did. It's not what he did. He lied. I wasn't involved. Never even been there. Shaved his face, changed his appearance, provided an alibi, which we now know, as he's admitted that it was him, was false. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about the law and about intent. I've said this already. Nobody is standing here saying he went there with the intent to kill Erin McCarthy. That's not what we have to prove. What we have to prove is that he acted recklessly, that he was aware of and consciously disregarded a substantial and unjustifiable risk of causing bodily injury to Erin McCarthy. And the state must also prove that he acted recklessly with extreme indifference to the value of human life. That's a lot of words, a lot of legal terms, so I want to break it down for you because it could be confusing. And I want you to think about it this way during your deliberations. Start with recklessness. Ask yourselves, did the state prove whether the defendant was aware of and consciously disregarded a substantial and unjustifiable risk of causing harm to Erin? Ask that question first, and you use the evidence, direct and circumstantial. And was his disregard of that risk of causing any harm to her body a gross deviation of what law-abiding citizens would do? Next, ask yourselves, did the state prove that Erin suffered any harm to her body? And lastly, did the circumstances under which he acted demonstrate that blatant disregard? Look at the video. It is all the evidence you need to find that the state has proved, beyond a reasonable doubt, second-degree assault. Now, the defendant gives you some reasons, talks about a bunch of reasons why this isn't second-degree assault. Well, there was no weapon. There is nothing in the law that you're going to hear that a weapon is required, that a weapon is needed, or that a weapon has to be used in order to commit this crime. He ended the fight without killing her. It's not how it ended. It's the conduct that he engaged in while he was committing the crime. He didn't return and try to hurt her again. Again, that's what happens after. Look at the conduct in the moment. And he didn't have bruises on his hands over a week later. Detective Burke, 28-year law enforcement officer, told you, if you watched the video, it meant nothing to him that he didn't have bruises. This was a week later. This isn't an attempted murder case. He didn't kill the person. She was lucky. This charge exists because it is a reflection of our society's recognition that some conduct is just so severe that regardless of the outcome, it puts a life in danger, even if that target manages to walk away with only minor injuries. So don't be distracted by that. The law is clear. It is not necessary that the injuries be life-threatening. Just because Aaron was able to escape this beating with only some bruises and cuts doesn't diminish the risk associated with the conduct. The defense counsel has asked you to convict Mr. Lamonde of misdemeanor simple assault, but the state is overreaching. This is your decision. It's not my decision. It's not Attorney Durkin's decision. It's your decision based on the evidence. What the state has proved in that video that he demonstrated blatant disregard. He failed at his plan to seriously hurt Erin and send the appropriate message to her boyfriend. The law doesn't excuse the conduct because of poor execution. He did a bad job. That doesn't mean he didn't commit the crime. He suggests that a misdemeanor would be a just verdict, and that's simply not true. A just verdict would be one that applies the facts to the law, as you as jurors are sworn to do. When you go into that room and have the opportunity to view all the evidence, watch the video. 40 punches, 2 knees to the face, thrown to the ground. Don't look at them in isolation. Look at the entire conduct in its totality. And it equals one thing, that blatant disregard. This wasn't immature. It was planned. It was reckless. It was violent. And it demonstrated a blatant disregard for her life. Apply the law to the facts, and when you do that, return the just verdict, which is guilty of second-degree assault. Thank you, folks.